First question, how would you rate this debate 1 to 10 when it comes to what you learned and having a better sense of where the candidates stand on issues? 1 to a 10?
10.
10.
Yeah. I give it a 6.
6?
6.
6?
8.
8.
I'd say 6.
6?
7.
Raise your hand if you were happy with the way your candidate performed. And I know you two are not sure or weren't sure before this started. Is everyone happy with how they're satisfied? Okay. For the two people who said before this debate started that they are not sure how they're going to vote, do you have a clear sense of who you'll probably vote for in this moment?
That's a tough one.
Still a tough one.
Because they both are good. They both are good, to me anyway.
Ellie?
I do have a better insight, I think.
Would you like to share?
Oh man. I think that I am more Republican leaning. It's really hard to put someone like President Trump, former President Trump, in the White House again, especially based on like January 6th actions and just his demeanor. He's a hard person, I think, to like.
Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump. Does Vance help him when it comes to people like you who are not impressed with the rhetoric, aren't happy with some of the comments made, but as you just stated, normally you're a Republican?
Yeah.
Normally you vote Republican.
Yeah.
Another quick question, show of hands, who thinks that Governor Tim Walz won this debate? Who thinks, okay, we got one. Who thinks that Senator J.D. Vance won this debate? Really? So we have 4 people that believe J.D. Vance won this debate. Eric, what about you? You didn't raise your hand.
I didn't put a hand up because I felt like Tim Walz did a better job of like answering the questions like fully with like actual data points. I feel like J.D. did a good dance of like controlling some of the narrative and like hitting on some of his talking points again. And I think he did like a great presentation. So I think it kind of depends on what you were looking for.
Was this one of the more civil discussions that you've seen in a while?
Yes.
Yes.
And how did it make you all feel? And I'll start with you, Ellie.
It made me feel better about a decision of going farther Republican, but it made me happy to see that it was more tame.
Max?
From someone who very vividly remembers Trump and Biden's first debate in 2020 and what a mess that was of back and forth, I was happy to see that on both the presidential and vice presidential debates that they were way more civil.
Christina?
Well, I believe this debate that I saw made me happy that, again, the politics is going back to us treating each other with respect. And all the rhetoric, that horrible rhetoric, was not in this one tonight. It made me very happy.
And Holly?
Yeah, I agree. I liked how it went. I thought that they both complimented each other when they needed to and gave respect to each other when they deserved it too for the comments that they gave. And I just thought that it flowed really well and that they got along as two gentlemen, I felt like.
Eric?
Yeah, no, I really appreciated that. I thought that was great to see, and I'm glad that both sides like stepped up and did that.
Yeah, I'm glad to see they both got along very well.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't no fighting and no bickering and all that.
Were
I thought it was
you
good.
expecting that though with these two?
I was.
You were
Yeah.
expecting some
Sure,
bickering.
a little
or-
bit, you know.
There was that part where they had to mute the mics, and we all kind of chuckled. I want to go to you, Max, because I was watching you throughout, and I think you were the most expressive. When J.D. Vance, and not that you weren't like doing anything out of the ordinary, but when I was looking at you, I noticed you would nod your head when J.D. Vance was speaking, particularly opening up about his background, about coming from, his roots and a drug-addicted mother and, getting into an Ivy League school and all of that. What is it about him and what you heard from him tonight that really strikes you as this is my guy and this is why I'm voting, on the Trump Vance ticket?
I think that my biggest takeaway from Vance is that he is able to articulate himself, his feelings, his policies in a respectful way, whereas it balances him and his counterpart, or him and his running mate, as he said, right? It's one of the things that I dislike about Trump, even though I'm planning to vote for him, is the personal attacks. I feel that they're just not necessary. But I just feel like Vance is very well spoken. He has clearly done his homework in the things that he talks about, and as they both said, they're going to misspeak. And that's human nature. I don't fault either one of them for it. But I do feel that he answers the questions for the most part as politicians do, and when somebody else doesn't, he calls them to task on it, as he did to Walz on the Tiananmen Square issue, and never did we get a clear answer out of that entire rebuttal, and even him saying, "You can answer the question," and he didn't do it. I feel that that's weak.
Christina, you look like you wanted to say something, and there were times I was looking at you specifically when they were talking about the immigration bill,
Right.
and how that was something that was supported by conservative, but it didn't get passed.
Right, and I do remember that happening when that happened. I was really disappointed. It's like, this is a really good bill that they all seem to agree upon, the Republicans and the Democrats, to stop the craziness down at the border. Trump stands up and says no, and it doesn't pass. It's like, wait a minute, he's not even running our country. What's he doing, So it did kind of that right there. But the immigration, I understand, is a big thing. It's just, they just have to figure out how to get it under control,
Were you all surprised at all at the number of times where it felt like they both acknowledged how they agreed on issues, and even if it was something small, like talking about the devastation from the storm, and saying, I think we both agree, our hearts break for people who are in the community, but specifically the housing crisis, they acknowledge that they're on the same page with some things. And then when they talked about the transition of power, Vance said that if he'll have my help, if he wants it. If you guys don't mind just talking to us about what that was like to see candidates on opposite sides of the spectrum agree on certain things and be able to sort of move on.
That's the way it should be. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely pleasantly surprised to see them reaching out to just point out those connections. I will say on the Tiananmen Square thing, he did answer the question poorly, but he answered it. He said he got there later in that summer, and he could have answered that question more clearly. You were talking about the immigration bill, and I would have loved to see that pass as well. I felt like I saw a lot of rhetoric, and I don't know how that's going to come true, because at the end of the day, Trump is the candidate. Trump has made very clear how he treats people that are loyal to him or disloyal to him. So I think J.D. Vance can say that and maybe mean that. But if Trump gets elected or doesn't get elected, if we do have another situation like January 6th again, J.D. Vance isn't going to have any influence over what that looks like. So that's why it's I think it sounded good on stage, but there's no track record to back up that that's how those two people are going to behave if they're put in that situation.
In reference to just the amount of times that they agreed
Oh,
on
yes.
different policies, not all the way, but just this sort of mutual respect where there was a recognition of, I think he does want
Right.
better policies, or I think we do share similar views on some of this stuff.
It was shocking because I didn't expect it, and it just made me realize how much they're alike. But I think that they just have different ways of going about things, and so that's where we have the conflict. But it seemed that they agreed on so many things together, and mutually about things.
Overall, and we can start with you, Bill, what were your big takeaways after watching this debate? I know you said you're still undecided, but what were the big takeaways for you?
Well, I don't know. I guess they're both smooth talkers.
It's called politics.
I give them credit, but that's probably mine. It's
Smooth talkers. Did you learn anything in detail about a policy or stance that you didn't know before?
No, not really, but they were both close on everything. You know,
They
were,
felt close to you on pretty much
they were-
all the
yeah,
issues.
You know, and I'm glad. I'm glad about that. You know, they finally. You know, we got to get along.
So
You know,
is,
whether you're Democrat or Republican, you know, get along.
as someone who is undecided then, do you think the country will be okay no matter who wins after seeing the two of them?
Wow. I hope we're going to be okay. Put it that way. I can't really say. That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Very tough one.
Eric, what about you? What were your big takeaways after watching this?
I feel a lot more excited about the Harris-Walz economy plan, and I know the economy is important to all of us. I remember 2019 before the pandemic, and I remember the stock market doing well, but I still remember just as many, if not more, people that were struggling to pay rent or save up for a house or other things like that. So when I hear about some of the initiatives around helping small businesses, I'm a small business owner. When I hear about these credits to buy houses or help families, those things I think are going to help the middle class. I think those things are important, and I didn't learn anything today from J.D. Vance or those tax policies on the Republican side that are actually going to help really everyday people. So I felt that I learned a bit more about more confidence with the Harris-Walz plan on the economy, and I feel excited about that.
Holly, what about you? When you hear someone like Eric say there was no specificity about how J.D. Vance, how Donald Trump's policies would help the middle class, what do you say to that, or what are you thinking after watching that debate?
I don't really think that Donald Trump needs to prove it again because he already proved it before. So I don't think that's even relevant at this point. In regards to learning things, I really didn't know much about either of them other than seeing their pictures. So I didn't even know how they carried themselves, held themselves, spoke, anything. So for me, that was really eye-opening to see J.D. Vance. Like you said, he's very articulate. I think he can hold himself very well and keep his composure. So I was very surprised on that because I really haven't seen too much of him, speaking and things like that in that light.
Biggest takeaway?
I like him as a VP. I do. I think I like the way that he carries himself.
Christina?
I was very sad on January 6th to see what happened to our country 4 years ago when Biden won, and I don't want to see that happen again. And I don't know if Trump doesn't win how it's going to play out, and it kind of scares me. Because some of not all his followers, but some of his followers are very, I don't even, they're so blinded that they can't see anything else. And for him, even to this day, in my opinion, to say he won that election is just makes me worry about his brain.
Whose brain?
Trump. He's saying he's never admitted to losing the election in the last election.
And how about how Senator Vance answered that question?
If he's going to back, if Pence hadn't done what he did on January 6th, I don't know what would have happened to our country. But it's going to scare me if we're going to have the same thing. And, well, no, the vice president would be Kamala that would do that, right? So, no, I guess we'd be okay. I know, I'm trying to figure that out in my brain. But I've never worried about our voting being compromised, and it kind of was a shocker to think about that, that other countries would come in and mess with us like that. But I guess that's reality.
Max, the biggest takeaway for you after watching tonight?
So the 3 points that I talked about originally was, the economy, and as you said, there are 4 years to show. We don't need to rehash it out. We already know we're going to go back to essentially that with whatever can be secured through Congress and the Senate. We always have to remember that the president doesn't just push a button and change everything. It doesn't, that power is not there. So the economy is there. Spoke about briefly on, foreign policy and, not being the world police, as South Park loved to, clarify in their movie. We don't need to be that. And there is a lot that I like that he said that, what do you say, the strength of power or whatever it was, how he phrased it. the last 4 years has shown that that has not been there. In the prior before that, people didn't like it. Other world leaders didn't necessarily like his gruffness, his going on Twitter and going on rants, his personal attacks and all that. But he checked the other world powers that were dangerous. And whether it be Putin, whether it be North Korea and China, things didn't happen under his watch like they have over the last 4 years. Ukraine, for example, even the Israel, and Iran-backed Hezbollah stuff. He has a way of checking other world powers, so they understand and they respect the United States, and they're not going to do things that are going to draw our ire either directly or through our allies. But finally, the most important is the immigration. We heard about that and how it's affecting all of our cities, how all these people are being displaced. And people do need to understand that there is a legal way to do it. All for that. That's what America is all about, right? But it has to be a legal and structured way of doing it. And people should believe that, hey, if I go to another country, whichever one I wanted to around the world, and I just expect to be let in, and I'm told no, or it's not necessarily the way the law states, I shouldn't be able to just get in. Now, I understand people apply for asylum. They do things legally. That's the way it needs to be done. We are in a mess right now because there's influxes in Michigan, in our area, and in other large cities. And all of these kids are displaced. And in the greater Grand Rapids area, they fall to the foster care system. So these other entities, nonprofits that basically essentially run that through licensing, they're responsible for trying to find housing for these kids, whether it's in group homes or through actual foster homes. These kids who are now falling into, the term of misguided youth are getting into trouble. They are, the only culture they know is the one from back home, and things don't work that way in the United States under our laws. And then they wind up getting in trouble, either, victimizing others and operating in a way that they were perceived was okay back home or back where they originated from, and it's not okay here.
Have you seen some of this personally too? You talking about your role in law enforcement?
Yes, and that's where I can really speak to it. And I like they said, I feel terrible that people will come here that are not here legally, then they have children here who are then American citizens, and then what do you do with that, right? That's a mess. I don't have an answer for that. But what I do see happen is other cultures come here and are undocumented, and I can state in the last year and a half, over 70-75% of some of the people that have already gone through the criminal justice system on cases that I worked were undocumented migrants. And my investigations are family related, so either child abuse and neglect or sex offenses.
So this is personal for you.
Yeah, it's my
personal,
it's my professional observation.
Yeah.
And the other issue there is they don't necessarily, because they're not here, they're not documented. They don't have documented criminal histories. So then in the state of Michigan, the sentencing guidelines are really low. So you see crimes that in your opinion are heinous and would be heinous, to here, are getting very minimal sentences.
I saw you shaking your head immediately when Senator Vance talked about first starting with the criminals. You were, clearly supportive of that. Christina, it seemed like it was making sense to you as well.
Oh yeah. Criminals definitely. If you're here illegally and you're criminal, I believe you should be deported and not let back in. Unfortunately, they keep coming back in, and that's the hard part. But yeah, I totally agree with that.
And Eric, again, I know you're planning to vote for the Harris-Walz ticket. You seemingly feel the same way.
Yeah. I think if people, came to this country illegally and they are committing crimes, I think they should absolutely, be deported. I think it is a messy situation to figure out how to do that with families, but I think all of us want this country to be safe. I definitely consider myself pro-immigration, but I want to see those people come through, legally and go through the system.
And Ellie, your takeaways, because I know we're getting all the way around the room. I want to make sure I ask you, what was something that really sort of stuck out? And it sounds like the economy and immigration for everyone here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is still high up in terms of priority.
And abortion.
And abortion?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, my three were economy, abortion rights, and then also gun control. And I feel like there weren't really I feel like on gun control, they both agreed that that something needed to be done, but there really wasn't a plan to fix anything. The only thing that I heard was Vance saying that he wanted more security in the schools.
How do you feel about that, especially having 2 young children?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly appreciate the security, but I think that they also talked about a mental health crisis and that being an impact, and I think there should be focus on that in the schools as well. I appreciate if someone were to have access to a gun in my kid's school, I have no idea what I would do. And if there was a security officer there that would be able to eliminate that threat and eliminate the situation, then I certainly want that.
Yeah, I do think there was kind of like an unfair drawback during the debate where they tried to draw in like some of the illegal migrants and those guns, talking about that with school shootings. To my memory, like none of the school shootings were related to like situations like migrants bringing in illegal weapons, but you talk about like the enhanced background checks and some of these things, like, you know, I guess I can say I'm a gun owner too. I was like, do I really want to share that? But it's like, you know, I believe in some of these things when they talk about like, can we do enhanced background checks? Can we do mental health checks on people that are purchasing guns, and like holding parents accountable if they're like giving access to guns to kids? I mean, those things need to be looked at. And that's, I think, a very important reality to talk about, is like when these school shootings are happening, like who are the kids that are perpetrating these and what are the situations that they're having at home?
Michigan is the state that prosecuted the parents.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
That put them away for 10 years.
Right.
But that was kind of a unique situation. I think the parents were a little bit more involved in what he was doing and handed him the gun and stuff. I mean, I don't believe all parents, you know, but I think in this situation it was quite a unique.
Yeah, that was a landmark case,
Yes,
I
it
think.
was,
And,
in the country.
Help us understand what happened in that debate that made you go, you know what, I think I'm definitely going to go for Trump and Vance on this one. Was there a moment?
I don't think I was convinced just through the abortion argument to go Trump Vance. There were other factors like gun control and the economy and immigration, foreign policy that made me sway that way. Abortion is definitely still a strong topic, but there were other factors, and unfortunately not one person has the same opinions, all the same opinions that I do.
And how much of hearing from J.D. Vance made you more comfortable with a decision to now support that ticket?
Him just saying pro-family was really what had me. And he seemed not to have such a hard stance on no abortion at all.
Since we're on the topic of reproductive rights, Max, how did you feel when you heard both candidates discussing it?
It's hard for me because we needed some fertility assistance with our youngest son, right? I think that what happens is people get polarized when they hear the topic abortion or Roe v. Wade. It's about more than just abortion. It draws in all the fertility, I guess we'll call them rights, the right to birth control if you want it, and some of those things do get jammed up in this gray area that we find ourselves in. Now, I will say that I do believe, and it's not necessarily a popular opinion, depending on who it is, but I do believe that our country was founded there are some things left to the states. This was one of them. Trump specifically said that very clearly in the presidential debate. This is something that used to be at the states level, and it's been so long that people believe that it falls to the federal level. Now, abortion, again, people get polarized. They think, oh, well, abortion, whenever a woman, right? Well, women's rights are important. Doctors are not going to, say, well, essentially, if you're going to lose your life, well, you're going to die then, right? These people that Walz talked about that traveled states to get medical care, they didn't die because a doctor said, I'm not going to help you, right? Like, that's not my understanding and my takeaway from that. But I do feel that, the pro-family thing that he talked about, that was very well received. That was very important because a lot of times people it's a black and white, only one or the other, and it's only abortion. The rest of all of that is not drawn into the equation.
A quick show of hands when he said the name Amber Thurman. How many of you all were familiar with that story?
I am.
3? So Amber Thurman is who he was referring to, who left Georgia, drove to North Carolina to have a surgical abortion. She couldn't have the surgical abortion because she was late. So someone said at the office, why don't you take these abortion pills? So the first one she took while she was at the office, she drove back to Georgia, and within days of taking the second pill, she started having severe pain. Her boyfriend called 911. She went to the hospital, and they went in to perform a DNC, which is to remove the remains of the fetal, stuff from the uterus, but they did it 20 hours after she was admitted. And when he said Amber Thurman would have been alive and if it happened in Minnesota, I think no one knows with certainty, but it's this idea of the lengths that someone's going to, because in that state, at that time, 9 weeks is too late. All that said, when you know, I guess, as you said, it's sort of complicated. It's not just about abortion, and it becomes a heated topic for a lot of people, and it's a personal issue, obviously. But when you hear sort of that type of a story, does it change your perspective or take, or do you feel like it's not something that you typically weigh in on anyway?
And I think, and I'm glad you asked that, because I would definitely want to clarify on something. When Roe v. Wade goes away and it goes back to the states, there's going to be a transition time, so to speak, for people to figure out, okay, so who of our lawmakers are going to do right by women's rights, so to speak, women's choices. And unfortunately, in doing that, things like this are going to happen, and that is tragic. As both of the candidates would agree, both those incidents for Thurman and the other one that they spoke about are tragic. And when it's taken back to the state's level, people are going to have to determine, because you don't want to say, well, fine, just don't live in that state, right? People don't have that. Not everybody has that option. That's not fair. But what they can do is determine, okay, so now we need to look and see who are our lawmakers and what is their standpoint. And if they aren't going to be for women's rights, then you find the ones that are, and you elect those.
And if I could clarify, ProPublica broke that story. They broke it because there was a committee that reviewed Amber Thurman's records and determined that her death, there's a good chance it was preventable if that DNC had been done earlier. But the question is, why was it 20 hours? We don't know, because no one was able to speak to the doctors. But the theory is because of other doctors in these states that have more restrictive abortion bans, are the ideas of questions about, are we allowed to? Should we wait? Could I be prosecuted? And I think, to your point about working out some of those kinks about, well, what does this now mean in said state? Because there's no universal, this is legal up to this point. Christine, I want to give you a chance to comment. You have 5 boys.
Yes.
You talked before we went on television about how hard it is probably for people to raise that amount of children today.
Yes.
The cost associated with raising children. When it comes to reproductive rights, where do you stand, and what did you make of what both candidates had to say?
Well, I believe it's a woman's decision. It's a private decision. I believe in it. I've never had one, and I never would. But I do believe a woman has a right to make her own decision. And I'm not here to judge anybody. I saw a report on TV, and I don't know if it was a 20/20 or 48 hour, but it was one of those two, because I watch those all the time. And it was about, I think there were like 4 or 5 or maybe 6 different women that had run into issues in their state with abortions and stuff. And it was all their stories, and boy, it was really, really sad. Yeah. Where they had to leave the state, and there was one woman that, I don't remember the stories, but all of them were very, very sad how it affected them, because they weren't able to get the medical attention they needed in their state.
Holly, if you don't mind, just.
Yeah, I'm pro-choice, pro-family, I guess you could say. I think it's every person's choice, every woman's choice as to what they want to do with their body. I think it's, something that everybody should have that option to do if they need to. Yeah.
Okay. I want to get Bill back into this conversation a little bit.
Still, Bill.
Bill, when they were talking about health care and this idea that concepts and plans may not be enough to help the American voter understand what that means regarding pre-existing conditions, how important is the topic of health care to you? And did you find yourself learning anything from the candidates that you didn't already know?
No, I have, excuse me, I have good health insurance, you know, being retired, and so I don't really have to worry about that. So I'm glad about that. And I feel sorry for people that don't have insurance because you could lose everything by one visit to the hospital. You're done.
I want to press you a little bit on this idea that you don't know who you're going to vote for, because we're like about a month away, and you voted for the first time in your life in 2016.
Correct.
You didn't vote in 2020 because you just said, I'm not happy with the guy that I chose, which was former President Donald Trump. If the election was tomorrow, who are you most likely to vote for?
I'd have to say Trump. I really would. I mean, I like J.D. Vance. He was pretty good. Like I said, he was smooth talking. And it was just, to me, it was better with Trump, you know, when I voted.
When you say better with,
You know, the
with
economy
Trump.
was better. You know, wasn't that much crime. There wasn't all these wars that were, you know, breaking out now. It just seemed different.
He still had a lot of shootings, though, when he was in president. He had shootings in the schools and stuff.
Oh, I understand that,
Yeah.
you know, but I mean, you peel everything back and, you know, you weigh it up. You know, that's your decision. But mine is,
Yeah.
I think it was better, you know, when he was president. That's all I can say.
Eric?
What's the question?
Just asking for a
Yeah.
response as
I mean-
you listen, and
Yeah, no,
we're now down to, we
I
have
hear it,
1,
I
2,
hear it, I
3,
don't-
4.
I
Out of the 6, we started out a little different.
Yeah.
But
No, I
now we
mean-
have 4 people that are sitting here who are saying, you know what, I'm going to go with Trump.
Yeah.
And you two are in the
That
minority
scares me.
group.
It scares me.
That scares you.
It does. It
Why?
scares me a lot because I just don't like his rhetoric. I don't believe anything he says. Anything he says really just is, and everything they've proven time and time again what he has said is lies, and he still, you know, that kind of scares me. It scares me that he's going to run our country again.
Yeah, I mean, I am someone that looks a lot at history. I am a nerd by a lot of standards, and I just understand that a lot of these things like do take time. So when people talk about the economy, I feel like I probably understand that like pretty well. And I just didn't see the things that Trump was doing that again was like helping people. I mean, when I really think back to that time frame, like I still remember people struggling. Like the stock market was doing great. So if you had money in the stock market and you were pulling money like off of that, I could see why people would say that. But it's
Do
like
you all have money in the stock market?
No, I don't.
Like I don't.
But you all are homeowners.
Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily stock market, but I'm assuming you also talk about like in
401k.
retirement.
Correct.
401ks,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So towards retirement investments, yes.
Does everybody here have some level of, I mean, you just said you're retired,
Right.
you're good,
Yeah.
living your best life.
You know, I'm living my best life, yeah.
But do you all
It's
just
all
remember
good. Put
people
it
like
that way. It's
wasn't
all
struggling in 2019? Like, do you remember just like everything was rainbow and sunshines?
I will say I do feel like my grocery bills were a lot lower, and I do feel like gas was lower. So I do feel like that impacted a bit. Yeah.
Can I speak on one of these topics?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I heard, the housing market, I remember it was hard to compete to buy a house. Building was, I mean, we built because that was way easier than trying to mess with that market. And I heard, this was the first time I heard it, was Governor Walz speaking about the credits that the party was going to provide, the $25,000 down payment, and then it was $5,000 or $10,000 tax credit, correct me if I'm wrong. And that scares me. I remember all of the excess, the COVID money, or whatever they called the COVID payments we all got, right? I knew I was gonna wind up paying that back at some point in time. Sure enough, those go away, and then I have a child all of a sudden that I'm claiming again, and boom, I got hit, right? And then inflation tax on right after that. You start handing out $25,000 for down payments. That sounds awesome. For people that are going to get that, and we don't know what the qualifiers are, right? So we don't know. So let's just take it at face value, 25 grand. Okay, for a down payment. Unless with the cost of homes now, I don't know how you would be able to buy a suitable house, let's just say in the Grand Rapids area, and have that $25,000 bail you out enough to avoid having to pay PMI. You're not going to get 20% down out of that, right? So you're still going to be paying PMI, which is expensive. You're going to give that to people that qualify, and I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that the people that qualify, it's going to be for lower income families. And in doing that, you put people in a precarious situation like we saw in 2008 with the mortgages. You're going to give them a window of hope to get a house. They're going to go to a bank and qualify because of the government assistance. And what if they don't have the means to maintain that, even though they are able to get in, but then they don't have the means or the financial discipline to maintain that loan, and then subsequently they lose that house, that money that came from wherever they're going to get it from, ultimately potentially we wind up leveraging our children and grandchildren's futures to pay for something. That's a lot of money to give out to a lot of people. That's way more than was provided on the tax credits per kids.
And if I can, just to clarify, everyone sitting here is a homeowner.
Yes.
So you all have sort of a unique perspective of what it takes to get into a home, what it takes to maintain a home. Your concern is that's not really the plan that's going to help the country and people who are looking for housing. You recognize there is a crisis, though.
That is a poisonous lure to give to people that are hoping to be able to get into a house, because
The $25,000.
the 25,000.
incentive.
Yep. Let's not even talk about how it's going to be, where it's going to come from, right? Let's just talk about doing that to people. That's victimizing people who already feel victimized by the system that we live in.
Christina, do you feel like it could actually be helpful?
I was in mortgages in 08 and 09. I was a mortgage loan originator. That's what I did for 20 years. And the program that I know here in the state of Michigan is a little bit different. We have a down payment assistance program, and you're given money, but when you go to sell your house or you go to refinance, you got to pay that money back. It's not yours to keep. You got to pay it back eventually.
that program.
Right. They don't charge you any interest. You don't have to pay it, but when you sell or refi, you got to give the state back the money.
Holly, how did it work out for you?
It worked out great, except I refinanced my house and I had to pay it all back. But they give you 3% down, 1% down. They pay your prepaids and your closing costs. That's all you get. So
But
it's not like a lump.
There's a different program. So
Yeah,
there's-
it could be different, but that's what it was for me.
There's
So
a city-
I had to bring like $200 to close, but I mean my house was a lot cheaper.
Right.
But I only got like $4 or $5 grand. I didn't get like 35 grand.
Right,
There's
when
a
you
city of
sold it.
Grand Rapids down payment. There's a state of Michigan, MISHDA. So we have a
did
couple.
MISHDA.
Yeah, there's a couple of programs here in the state that we use.
And
So when you hear the federal government wants to help with programs that have already been in place in some states, like here in Michigan, do you see that as a good thing or something that would actually put people in a bad situation
Well, I
years
guess
later?
I would agree with what he's saying. I guess it all depends on where the money's coming from, and do they have to pay it back eventually? Because I think that's what they said on TV, was that a program where eventually you'll have to pay it back.
And then what happens if you default on that loan and you foreclose on that house, and then, I mean, are they just going to forgive that $25,000? I don't think so. I think that then your credit, in the way our system works, is going to tank, force you to file for bankruptcy, and then
Tanks anyways if you're going to
exactly,
file
right?
foreclosure, so it doesn't matter.
Then you're setting people up to have a terrible credit history for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I don't see that happening a lot in Michigan. A lot of the stories that I hear are more like your story, where people do get the help and then they do own a house, and everybody doesn't take it. I know a lot of people who are renters who are in this boat that you're talking about, where they aren't interested in taking that jump. But I know a lot of people who have been saving $10,000, $15,000 to try to buy a house that haven't been able to do it.
Right.
So I think there are a lot more people with home prices going up, as we've all talked about, where that $20,000-$30,000 could actually help them
With what maybe
take-
they've already saved?
with money they've already saved, because they're going to have to do that to some extent to take a step out of poverty. I think you have a perspective and maybe a friend group that you've seen experience things, but I've seen a lot of people that are really trying to save up that amount of money that would love to buy a house, that would take care of it and build that equity, to just like haven't had that opportunity.
But let's face it, that's not who they're going to focus on.
Okay. So, Bill,
Yes.
my guy,
All right.
what did you make of the Harris-Walz plan when it comes to the housing market?
Well, you know, I feel bad for people that have to buy a house nowadays. They're so expensive. And half the time, you know, you got people with a lot of cash that come in there and buy them anyway before you get them, and then they'll sell them again and double their money. And $25,000 ain't gonna do nothing.
You say $25,000 ain't going to do
Ain't gonna
nothing.
help.
Yeah.
They're just too expensive.
So do you
Way too
do you think there's a better way to handle that?
Well,
Because you heard Senator Vance talk about looking at federal land to create more space for more housing, and there aren't as many places, at least on this side of the country, that have just a bunch of federal land that could be used perhaps for
Right.
helping the housing crisis.
but now you build new housing, new homes, and they're going to be even more expensive than the homes that are out there. To me, anyway. I mean, it's a crisis, no doubt. When I bought my home, I was lucky to get it just in time before they started raising the price. And I was lucky to refinance it just in time before the interest rates went up.
Right.
So I was pretty fortunate, you know, for that. Yeah, that's a tough issue.
Yeah.
It's just way out of line.
Yeah.
You know, and you have the banks that own a lot of them, but they won't release them. You know, they'll hold on to them and maybe let one go, and then, you know, just to keep the prices up and all that.
Yeah.
It's all about the dollar.
Could I just say something on that too?
Absolutely.
I've heard that a lot of investors are coming in and purchasing homes too, and then they rent them out, and of course then they jack the rent prices up. You know, I mean, right now a 1-bedroom, 1-bath across from me is going for $1,900 a month.
Oh my,
That they're brand new, granted, but $1,900 a month.
that's a lot of money.
For a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's not affordable.
No, it's not for most people, especially that small amount of space. Early on, we heard our moderators come out of the gate really talking about what we saw today. How many of you all were watching some of the live coverage when Iranian ballistic missiles were hitting Tel Aviv? Raise your hand if you saw some of that coverage.
Saw some of it.
You
yeah.
saw some of the coverage. As our moderators noted, the Middle East is on the brink of war. How much of the issues happening right now in the Middle East keep you up at night? Do you think about it? Is it something that plays into who you're going to vote for when you think about who could be leading our country as this war and others continue?
I think war is very complicated, you know, and I believe, if I remember correctly, that Israel and they've been fighting war since the biblical times, you know, and as far as anybody being able to come in and just solve that kind of problem, I don't know. I do believe that a lot of the countries, which I think I heard you say, depend on us way too much, you know.
You say too many countries depend on us.
Yeah, financial, we give them a lot of financial aid.
That
you
the
know.
U.S. gives a lot of
Yeah, a
financial
lot
aid
of
to these other countries.
Yeah,
Do you think it needs to stop? Do you see it as an interest, in our best interest when we're giving aid to other countries?
I don't know how much we should be involved, I guess, I don't know.
We have NATO for a reason. We are not to be world police, and it's time and time again, history continues to repeat itself in the Middle East and, you know, in Eastern Europe, that we get pulled into these situations, and we are just dumping money into those countries, and our own people are like, what's going on here? We have our own problems. And that's why I stated, you know, at the beginning that we need to we need to tighten our belt and shore up our own interests at home internally before we have any business shelling the kind of money we do to foreign nations.
They said it.
I also fear about like a potential World War III, like I mentioned earlier, and what that would do to our home, our kids, if they're going to have to, you know, who knows, start preparing for a war. That's terrifying.
Holly, you said it does keep you up at night.
Well, what I was going to say is I heard it's like $300 million a day that we're paying for that war right now over there.
Which one?
The Israel one that we're supplying and helping out over there. And like, that's just astronomical to me to even think of that amount every day being sent somewhere when we have so many people here that need that help and that we're not helping.
Eric, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that war sucks. I think that we should definitely not be spending as much money on it as we does. I think that having that money and those resources go to issues at home would be extremely important. I think that in some instances, like the war that's going on now, I think those wars were planned like a long time ago. Like if you look at the history of like Russia and the stuff that's going on in China right now, like a lot of these things have been in play for a long time, and it sucks that it's happening now.
Is it important for us to be involved? I mean, specifically in the Middle East, because of the interest that we have, because of the support that we continue to show, whether it is in Israel, whether it is in Ukraine?
Yeah, we got to help.
You said we got to help?
Yeah, we should help them, if we can. But, it's a lot of money, and that's what it's all about. It's all money.
When it comes to gun violence, I want to kind of go back to that topic because mass shootings were addressed, the number of guns that we have. Senator Vance talked about the immigration policies and sort of linking it to the illegal guns coming into this country. But the reality of it is there have been for quite some time, more guns in this country than people. Is there a solution as you see it? You all have children. Many of us did not grow up with mass shootings being a regular occurrence. It's on the news, it's on social media, the images, the pictures, the letters people leave. Is it an issue for you, and what did you take away from tonight's debate when it comes to gun violence?
I do feel it's an issue for me on the level of a lot of, again, the focus is on, well, we need to ban guns or assault rifles or, do these things to take them away. Where this really falls is on the family and the community. It's it takes a village. Well, with firearms in general, not just, assault rifles, it's all about responsible ownership. And what happens is that doesn't get the spotlight that it needs to. It's not only, the laws, because as we all know, people are going to get a hold of guns whether it's legal or not. It's going to happen. The majority, I believe that the majority aren't necessarily coming in from, through illegal immigration. I feel that it's irresponsible gun ownership in America, leaving your guns in your vehicles, allowing access to them to your children's friends, not basically practicing responsible gun ownership, leaving them, making sure they're locked up. Educating kids on, hey, if you come across a gun, what do you do, right? In my family, growing up, I grew up several generations of, proud gun owners and hunting and all that. And if I had walked across and actually found a gun that was laying out, I wouldn't touch it. I would go get an adult and a parent. And teaching kids to do that is important. And also, like we saw with the Landmark case, if parents are involved in irresponsible gun ownership and their children get a hold of it and, create havoc, victimize others, those parents share in that responsibility. Just as they would if they, neglect their children's environment and they're malnourished or they don't have the support systems they need. Firearms is the same way. You allow those out there, parents let their kids get them, and then crimes get committed, all these school shootings happen.
A lot of those school shootings that have happened involved AR-15 style weapons. Do you think there should be, is there a time to have a conversation about the access that people have to those types of weapons?
and this is something too that falls to the states, and states need to be tougher on it. Here locally in the West Michigan area, getting caught with a concealed weapon essentially, or let's say we'll use a handgun for example, is a felony, and yet government is not, or our criminal justice system is not tough on that, and you can get arrested for, it's called CCW, carrying a concealed weapon, go to jail and get out literally the next day on a personal recognizance bond, which means they'll assign you an amount, but they're going to let you right out. And this will happen time and time again, which is a problem. So we don't treat it strongly enough on the criminal justice side. As a society, we don't, from the parents to law enforcement to communities, get together and stress, hey, we need to educate, and through the education we can prevent a lot of this from happening. And then with the assault rifles, so people may or may not realize this, but handguns now, especially like Glocks or others, they make what they call a switch for it, and it turns it into a fully auto gun. So you get an extended
And
mag.
those pieces
You
are
have
easy to
you have
come
more
across
rounds.
online.
You have more rounds in that extended mag on a handgun than you do on an assault rifle. The reason people die from assault rifles is because the round, the velocity is such that, this is a little technical, but when you get shot with, like, let's say a 223 or an assault rifle, which is the caliber that they're using, your body can't, it expands your tissues more than they can contract. So with a handgun, that doesn't happen because it's lower velocity. With rifles, it does, and that's what causes that trauma, and people die from that a lot more.
The thing that's interesting to me is, like, I'm just listening to both of y'all, like, really all of you all talk about some of these different policies, and, like, Democrats have been, and I was originally a Republican. Like, I started out Republican. I could just not get on the Trump bandwagon. So here we are today. But it's like, Democrats have been trying to pass, like, enhanced background checks, like some of these gun safety laws for a long time now, and it just keeps getting, like, pushed down from different folks in the Republican Party. So it's great that, like, we're getting here and, like, we're saying that this is important, but, like, at the end of the day, you all are deciding to support, like, this party that has been moving in this direction that is, like, opposite of some of the things that you were saying is important.
How so specifically?
Well, specifically, like, with the shootings in the school, it's like we've been trying to get. From what I've been watching in Congress, it's been coming up for decades now about trying to get some of these just basic enhanced background checks passed. I got asked more questions when I was getting a dog from the shelter than when I was getting my gun. So it's like just looking at that issue, it's like we've been talking about that for a long time, and we're just now getting to a point where it seems like maybe there's going to be, like, actually, like, real support on both sides to do, like, basic gun safety things. But I feel like the Republican Party has not prioritized or taken, like, some of these basic common sense gun things, like, seriously.
Yeah, my thought process on it is if you purchase a firearm, right, easy to do unless you have some kind of record that prevents it, and then you practice irresponsible gun ownership, you leave that thing in your car unlocked, it gets stolen, used in a crime, at that point, yeah, you should be penalized for that, as far as being able to, maybe you don't get criminally charged for it, but you go on a list somewhere where maybe your right to purchase is suspended for a period of time. And that's something that, unfortunately, with especially when Second Amendment comes in, is hard even for Republicans to stomach. But at some point, there needs to be a check and balance for it. And the thought process is as a community, we need to hold each other accountable to responsible. Gun ownership is going to happen, right? But it needs to be responsible. And those that choose not to, well, you might potentially for a while lose your privilege.
Really quickly, I want to ask you guys each a quick question. Is democracy on the line in this election? Bill?
Yes, sure is.
Eric, why are you laughing?
Because it just absolutely is, and I had to catch myself, but it's like, oh my God, is it? Yeah.
Hollis?
Same. I feel the same way. Yes.
Yes, definitely.
More than ever in my life, yes.
More than ever in your life?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kelly? Yes. I know you said you're concerned about another January 6th or worse. Do you all want to hear from the folks at the top of the ticket? Would you want to hear from Harris and Trump one more time? Or are you convinced you know who you're voting for? It doesn't matter at this point moving forward. Bill?
I'd like to hear it one more time.
One more time?
Sure.
I want them to hear who they're voting for, so absolutely do one more.
I really don't want to.
No, you're good.
I'm done. I'm over it.
I'd like to see one more debate.
One more debate.
I'd go for it, yeah.
One more debate.
Between it wouldn't change my opinion, but I think it would help clarify some of their talking points on both sides.
I don't think it's worth it. But I feel like it's too combative.
I just want to go over some numbers with you guys. We talked about this before. Kent County has a history of picking the winner. You pick the winner 3 times out of the last 4 presidential elections. In 2020, 187,915 people voted for Biden. 165,741 voted for Trump, a separation of about 22,000. It was closer in 2016. Will you be surprised if your candidate wins? Who do you think will win?
I really don't know, but I think Harris is going to win.
You think Harris is going to win even though you're going to support Trump?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised either way. I just, like all of you just said, you care about democracy. Like, Trump does not care about democracy. I think if you actually like listen to him, you look at his actions around January 6th, you look at his actions leading up to the election, like he will tell you time and time again, like he cares about himself. He does not care about democracy.
Oh, I don't know. I honestly don't. I'm right down the middle at this point, like in who could go.
You could see it go either or.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just because I've heard the numbers are so close right now too.
Yeah. Are you going to be devastated if Harris wins?
What am I going to do? I mean,
Yeah.
my life is going to go on. It's not like.
But
it's
you
the
know
end
there
of
are
the
people that
world.
are
I know,
very
and that's
upset
the thing. Like, you need to
either
look
way.
you need to look at what has been done, not the person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand you don't like someone, but you can like somebody and not like somebody all day long. But you need to look at what they're doing.
That's
for
what
the
I'm looking at,
country and
exactly what
things.
he's doing. And that
So-
just scares me.
That's how I feel.
I will be very, very disappointed. Well, I hope Harris wins, but if she doesn't, our country's going to be in a lot of trouble. I really believe that.
Max?
I believe Trump's going to win.
Ellie?
I totally think it could be a flip of the coin. I think that there's going to be a lot of silent voters who are a lot of silent Trump supporter or previously Trump supporters that are going to vote Kamala and just don't want to say it.
Well, we will be watching Kent County because you guys seemingly get it right more than you get it wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to, before we, you want to clap? Let's
Yeah,
clap.
I like
Yay!
Good job, everybody.
Usually